Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Tuesday, the 27th day of May, 2025. And as always, we have some important stories to bring to you that have come across the wire in the last few hours. One in particular is hugely important. We'll get to that in a minute. And so, as always, what we're seeing here is stories taking place that are setting the stage for what the Bible said the world's going to be like at the time of the end of the age for the second coming of Christ and the many events that will precede it. All right, here's the story we're going to be dealing with. It's huge. Rabbis debate settling for prayer at either the Western Wall or the Temple Mount worship. In other words, where should we pray? At the Western Wall, or should we go on the Temple Mount and pray? We're going to talk about the meaning of this. Second, the Prime Minister suggests a hostage deal is imminent. Then he walks back the remark. The families denounce this as abuse. This is from the Times of Israel. Vladimir Putin escaped massive Ukraine drone assault on his helicopter. This happened actually a week ago, Moscow claims. It's a Breitbart story. And then Trump slams Putin after Russia's deadly overnight drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. He's gone absolutely crazy. This is from the New York Post. Well, one of the reasons he may have gotten crazy is the possibility that and the likelihood that they tried to take him out, that is Ukraine, when Putin visited the Kursk region there. And so many things going on. But this first story is the one I want to zero in on. In fact, we could have done the whole breaking news on this. I was tempted to, but I just want to give you some of the highlights here. Rabbis debate settling for prayer at Western Wall versus Temple Mount worship from Israel HaYom. A growing chorus of religious voices now advocates moving beyond the Western Wall entirely, urging Jews to pray directly on the Temple Mount itself. A profound religious controversy is dividing Israel's Orthodox establishment as Jerusalem Day approaches, with influential rabbis publicly questioning whether Jews should continue the traditional practice of praying at the Western Wall or embrace the more contentious path of ascending the Temple Mount for worship. Monday's Jerusalem Day observances commemorating Jerusalem's liberation traditionally draw religious Zionist groups to the capital in celebration of the city's reunification and restored access to Judaism's holiest sites. These annual pilgrimages culminate in the emotional prayer service at the Western Wall, where thousands gather for Thanksgiving ceremonies. And here's the yet a growing chorus of religious voices now advocate moving beyond the Western Wall entirely, urging Jews to pray directly on the Temple Mount itself. This unprecedented shift has ignited fierce debates within Orthodox circles, pitting traditionalists against those seeking to reclaim Judaism's most sacred space. The controversy stems from a historical ruling by Israel's chief rabbinate, supported by the vast majority of the country's rabbis, prohibiting Jewish ascent to the Temple Mount altogether. However, mounting challenges to this decision in recent years have prompted renewed theological examination of the issue. We consulted several prominent rabbis, this is the Israel HaYom here, to understand their positions on the divisive matter. The people of Israel must be in their complete state. Rabbi David Staub, who leads the Tzorah, a rabbinical organization and serves as rabbi of Shoham, articulated fierce opposition to Temple Mount ascent during our discussion. We believe the temple can be rebuilt only when the people of Israel achieve unity and moral purity of the highest order, alongside adherence to specific purity laws governing the mount. Currently, these essential conditions remain unfulfilled. The spiritual preparation is necessary to make us worthy even of Jerusalem itself. The notion of ascending the mount for prayer in our current spiritual state represents a fundamentally flawed approach. Temple Mount ascent will become possible only when the people of Israel reach their complete spiritual state. Now, this is again one of the popular views, and it's been the majority view for a long time, that Israel is not there spiritually yet, purity wise, to be able to ascend the Temple Mount. Rabbi Haggai Lunden, who heads the Holon Hester Yeshiva and directs the study at Ono Academic College, acknowledged that while he personally refrains from Temple Mount ascent, he says each person should act according to his own rabbi. He elaborated, the question of whether to pray at the Western Wall versus the Temple Mount has generated years of controversy. Most religious authorities currently rule against Temple Mount ascent. Yet today, certain voices argue that the security situation and the national considerations have strengthened the case for Temple Mount access. Now, here's the opposite point of view. Prayer at the Temple Mount is preferable. Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, founder and director of the Temple Institute and head of the Temple Yeshiva in Jerusalem's Old City, advocates the opposite approach entirely. While the Western Wall functions like an enormous synagogue with special sanctity for prayer within the ancient walls, Temple Mount prayer remains superior. This principle applies throughout the year and holds particularly significance on Jerusalem Day. Temple Mount prayer carries a different meaning and receives greater heavenly acceptance. This concept appears in King Solomon's dedication prayer for the temple, where he invokes the word prayer in various forms 24 times. 24 times. It's interesting when Solomon dedicated the first temple. This emphasis demonstrates the paramount importance of prayer on the Mount, the actual temple site. All right, the controversy is growing now. We cannot overemphasize how important this story is. The Bible says in both Testaments, actually, 4 passages in the Old Testament, 4 in the New, as we've documented here, that a third temple will eventually be built in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, a temple that will be center stage, ground zero for events that lead up to the second coming of Christ. However, the problem has always been the Jews have not been able even to pray outwardly on the Mount, let alone build a temple in which to worship. For the longest time, it seemed like the desire to see a temple was limited to only a few. But as more and more people are ascending the Mount, there are more and more stories about the need for Jews to take control of their own sacred ground. Now, something like this obviously doesn't happen overnight, but when we see movement towards this, we know that it will eventually happen. We can compare this to the founding of the modern state of Israel that we talk about in sign 3 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. In a nutshell, circumstances in the world prompted the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to return to their ancient homeland. Many testified then, as many do today, that something was drawing them to their land, the land of their ancestors. And the same thing we believe is happening will continue to happen to desire to see a temple constructed. While the temple will be built in unbelief of Jesus as the Messiah, the events that will occur on that sacred site will eventually lead to his return. For documentation, see our book 25 Signs. We're near the end. Sign number 8, preparations are being made to build a third temple, as well as our complete book on the subject, The Jews, Jerusalem, and the Coming Temple. And so they're free downloads from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy. And as we mentioned yesterday, we've done 4 videos on the subject recently to kind of put it all into perspective. So we keep our eyes on the Temple Mount, and this is a subject we've mentioned before that I've been interested in since 1982 on a trip to Israel there where I got involved, got to know with certain people who were desiring Jewish activists to build a third temple, and had some really interesting experiences over the years with them and try to get the firsthand explanation. They were frustrated because of the lack of interest of the majority of the people. In fact, one of the things we talked about in the 1980s and the 90s is that you hardly ever saw a story about the Temple Mount, maybe one every 6 months if you're lucky, of what's going on there. So it wasn't a real issue. It's becoming more and more of an issue, and we believe it will become an issue in the future. And so we will wait and see. But this is huge that they're even discussing this, and this is monumental compared to what the situation has been in the past. So, as always, let us keep our eyes on the Temple Mount. Remember, Israel is God's clock. The nation is the hour hand. The city of Jerusalem is the minute hand. But the Temple Mount is the second hand. Now, to a problem that is presently causing all kinds of grief to Israel. Headline number 2, the Prime Minister suggests, as we mentioned yesterday, a hostage deal seems imminent, that he walks back these remarks. Families denounce the abuses from the times of Israel. Netanyahu claims he wasn't speaking literally when he said he hoped to make an announcement on the captives today or tomorrow, sparking flood of inquiries from desperate families. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu infuriated the hostage families yesterday after declaring that he hoped to make an announcement regarding the hostages today or tomorrow, only to later assert he was not speaking literally. I really hope we can announce something regarding the hostages, if not today, then tomorrow, he said at the tail end of a video statement. He has been issuing nearly daily videos in recent weeks, updating the public on his efforts as prime minister while tearing into the various accusations against him, particularly those criticizing his handling of the war. Now, these remarks had prompted a flood of anxious inquiries from hostage families, surprised to hear that a breakthrough of the long-stalled negotiations with Hamas was on the horizon. Recognizing that his comment had quickly made waves, the prime minister's office sent a statement to reporters in the name of, quote, a senior official that attempted to walk back Netanyahu's remark. The official claimed that the prime minister's comment should not be seen as a signal of impending deal. He meant to say we will not give up on freeing our hostages, and if we don't achieve that, hopefully in the coming days we will achieve it later on, the statement said, adding that as of now, Hamas continues to cling to its refusal. Now, hostage families, of course, rightly so, lashed out at Netanyahu for getting their hopes up. We feel like we're being abused, said a statement attributed to hostage families that was aired on Channel 12. Every comment like this makes our already broken hearts leap. The expectation when it comes to such a sensitive subject is that they will show the minimum sensitivity and choose their words carefully. And so well said. Netanyahu certainly knows better than to say what he did. So, whatever motivation or possible breakthrough in the hostage negotiations that take place or will take place, every word has to be chosen carefully. Someone in that position, he knows better. He cannot give even the hint that something's going to happen if nothing is going to happen. It's kind of like what someone said initially when emails first became popular. People started sending emails to other people. And the major rule is you don't write an email so it can be understood. You write an email so it cannot be misunderstood. In other words, you clarify what you're saying so anybody that reads it will not accuse you of saying something differently. And so a man like Netanyahu, he's a human being. We make mistakes like this. We've all done this. Those of us who have spoken publicly on certain issues have said things and we think, oh, why did I say that? And didn't mean to, and you have to kind of walk it back, and you have to sometimes. But this was really an indelicate thing to say. Now, interesting, there is growing pressure to end the war and to make sure the Gazans aren't starving and to bring home the 20 living hostages. And there are numbers of stories right now floating around about a possible breakthrough in the talks. Whether true or not, the pressure is immense on the Israeli leadership. So, as always, we must wait and see what takes place. We really don't know. Now, on another front, we're going to shift gears here. There's several stories that are taking place with respect to Russia, Putin, Ukraine, the United States, and any peace talks. Headline number 3. Now, this one didn't get much headlines, but Breitbart did the stories about a week ago. And it says Putin escaped massive Ukraine drone assault on his helicopter, Moscow claims. Moscow has claimed that a massive Ukrainian drone attack targeted Vladimir Putin's helicopter as the Russian leader visited the embattled Kursk region earlier this week. Russian Air Defense Officer Yuri Dashkin said on Sunday that Putin's helicopter was at the epicenter of an operation to repel a massive drone attack on Tuesday, state media reported. This is Russian state media. The alleged attack came as the Russian leader visited the Kursk region, where he saw the most significant incursion into Russian territory since the Second World War, after Ukraine's forces launched a daring counter-invasion last summer. During his first visit to the Russian region after expelling the Ukrainians, Putin's helicopter became embroiled in an unprecedented drone attack comprised of dozens of fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, Dashkin claimed. I would like to stress the fact that the intensity of the attacks during the flight of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's aircraft over the territory of the Kursk region increased significantly, he said. Claiming the destruction of 46 Ukrainian drones, Dashkin said that Russian air forces were engaged in anti-aircraft combat and ensured the safety of the president's helicopter in the air. The task was accomplished. The attack of the enemy drones was repelled, with all aerial targets being hit. On Saturday, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov blamed, quote, some European nations led by the UK, France, Germany, and the EU leadership for the increased level of Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky claimed on Sunday that Russia had launched one of the largest combined drone and missile assaults in the conflict. He said over 300 drones and 70 missiles were fired against 30 cities across Ukraine overnight, hitting residential buildings and the dormitories of a university. Tragically, people were killed, including children, he said. The reports of increased attacks come from both sides, despite Kiev and Moscow completing the largest exchange for prisoners of war since the start of the conflict, after it was agreed to earlier this month at peace talks in Istanbul. Now, here's our take on it. If you're going to try to take out the leader of your enemy, you better not miss. Ukraine did miss. So the result would be predictable with Putin sending more and more drones and missiles at Ukraine. That's why they sent them. Because if this story is true about the attack on his helicopter that was repelled, and again, we're taking Russia's word for it, but if it is true, it gives credence to why he would do this huge attack back at Ukraine. It makes sense. But the uptick in the fighting, whatever the case may be, it's got President Trump angry again. Headline number 4, Trump slams Putin after Russia's deadly overnight drone and missile attack on Ukraine. He has gone absolutely crazy. This is the New York Post. President Trump slammed Russian President Putin for dispatching more than 300 drones and missiles against Ukraine and some of the most intensive attacks since the war first started, just 1 week after assuring that peace talks would start immediately. The attacks came as Russia and Ukraine are in the midst of a planned prisoner exchange. This is from Zuma Press. Trump told reporters Sunday he is not happy with the increasing violence and that he has no idea what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him for a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people. And I don't like that at all, Trump says. We're in the middle of talking and he's sending rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all. Now, would the violence have increased like this if Ukraine had not tried to kill Putin? This is the question we're asking. While we don't know the answer to this, we do know that it will be all the more difficult to come up with some agreement that will be agreed to by both sides. And so, if the story is true about the attack on Putin's helicopter a week ago, then it makes total sense why he sent, from Russia's perspective, why he's done the huge missile and drone attack on Ukraine. Now, here's the bottom line. All in all, our three main stories on the Temple Mount, Israel at war, and Ukraine remind us that the circumstances are moving towards the biblical predictions of what will take place at the time of the end. And of course, while the timing of all of this to happen is unknown, it is certainly clear that so many different things that have been predicted are moving in this direction. And as always, we will keep you posted. There is never a dull moment here. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.